Welcome, everyone, to our weekday morning podcast on the Kabbalah for Heretics, in which for the past, get ready, 30 years, and that's not an exaggeration, every weekday morning, with very rare exceptions, we have been going through the sacred Zohar systematically, volume by volume, page by page, sentence by sentence. And over that period of time, we have completed volumes 1, 2, 3, and recently volume 4. And we have just as recently begun volume 5. So welcome, and let's get back to where we left off in our last podcast. Rabbi Hezekiah adduced here the verse, O Lord, how manifold are thy works, from Psalms. How manifold, he said, are the works of the Holy King in the world. He is like a man who takes in his hand a number of bundles of seed and sows them all at once, and in time each kind comes up separately. This is a very tacit description of evolution. There are other very clear references to evolution in the Zohar. Orthodox Jews, for the most part, do not have problems with the theory of evolution. Some do, but for the most part, they do not. So the Holy One, blessed be He, accomplished His work with Chochmah, with the Father, with Chochmah. Chochmah, wisdom, is the second sephirah of the 10 sephiros, and it has the hidden meaning of Abba, or Father. So the Holy One, blessed be He, accomplished His work with the Father. With the Father, with wisdom, Chochmah, He took all together and sowed them. And afterwards they all issued, each in its time, as it says, in wisdom, Chochmah, Abba, hast thou made them all. And He did that, if you look at the 10 sephiros, by having intercourse with His counterpart on the left-hand side, the feminine, Binah, which has the partsuf of Ima, or mother. This is a direct reference to sexuality and sacred sexuality among Zoharic practitioners. They were all secreted in Chochmah, wisdom, and they did not issue into being save by certain paths alongside of Binah, understanding, or its parts of Ima, the mother. It's talking about the sexual intercourse in God itself, between the masculine and the feminine, Chochmah and Binah, Abba, Father, and Ima, Mother, from whence they become firmly established. It is in the feminine that they become established and are given birth. Wow. And you probably thought you knew about the Zohar, but that's what it's doing here. The Zohar, again, the Zohar is not, as it were, a religious text. It is not about Judaism, the religion, not at all. It is not about being a good person or how to succeed in life or how to be happier, the way most interpreters interpret it now. It is not about all that. In 30 years, we have proven it. The Zohar is about God, about the nature of God, about the inner workings of God and man and the universe. It is deep and mystical. And the Zohar says of itself, cursed are those who do not understand that about the Torah, for they shall have no share in the world to come. It clearly says that if you interpret the written Torah just the way it is now interpreted, That is not looking at Torah. Only when you look into its deep secret meanings are you studying Torah. And if you don't do that, it says, if you only look at what it appears to mean, what the rabbis say it means, you shall have no share in the world to come. Observe, now, just to make it clear that this is what it has been talking about intercourse in God and man. I'm not just making it up. Look what it then says in summary. Observe that when a man goes to unite with his wife in sanctity, his holy thought awakens a spirit compounded of male and female, and God signals to a messenger who is in charge of the conception of human beings and entrusts to him that spirit and informs him where to deposit it, and also lays various injunctions on the spirit itself. Do I need to repeat that for you? It's saying that when a man and a woman come together to have actual sex, if they do it with the proper sanctity, with the proper kavanah intention, if they do it intentionally, reproducing Abba and Ima, having sex in God, then God's holy thought awakens a spirit compounded of male and female. The Zohar is about theurgy. It is about magic with a K. There is no question about it. Here it is describing sex between a man and a woman as a sacred, theurgic, magical ritual. And it's not the only place. It's just that as the Zohar has been going on from volume to volume, as I've been pointing out, it increases in depth and esotericism to where here, volume 5, at the very beginning, is discussing sex between a man and a woman and how it is to be practiced, quote, in sanctity, unquote, as a theurgic ritual. In the book of the sorceries of Asmodai, listen to that. Sorceries. This is the Zohar speaking. You ain't going to even hear this read out by any of the other rabbinical interpreters. But it says, in the book of the sorceries of Asmodai, we find that one who knows how to practice magic from the side of the left should rise by the light of the lamp and utter certain incantations and call the unclean sides by their names and prepare his forms for those whom he invites and says he is ready for their commands. Sorcery, magic, it's openly, plainly discussing it here in the 5th and last volume of the Zohar, at the very beginning of it. Let me read it again. In the book of the sorceries of Asmodai, we find that one who knows how to practice magic from the side of the left-hand side of Kabbalah, should rise by the light of the lamp and utter certain incantations and call the unclean sides by their names and prepare his forms for those whom he invites and says he is ready for his and their commands. Then that man passes out of the dominion of his master and places himself in charge of the unclean side. This is not a warning not to do it. It's a description of what happens. And through his incantations, 2 spirits appear in the shape of men, which show him how to confer certain benefits or do certain kinds of harm at certain specified times. Listen to this. The whole purpose of left-hand magic is to enter into the left-hand side of God, the unholy side of God, and from there to practice holiness. But there also, that man is given the power to create good or himself to create evil, because both are in the left-hand side. Now listen, please listen. Don't tell me you know all this. You may know it in a non-Zoharic sense, but you did not know that the Zohar practices and advocates magic, sorcery. You did not know that. You do now. Straight from the Zohar itself. My God. Then that man passes out of the dominion of his master and places himself in charge of the unclean side, the left-hand side, descending to ascend, being the evil to diminish the evil. And through his incantations, two spirits appear in the shape of men, which show him how to confer certain benefits or to do certain kinds of harm at certain specified times. The Zohar can be used to obtain power, magical power to do harm or to do good, rightfully, and there is nothing here condemning it. There is some truth to the Christian assertion in the Middle Ages and so forth, that the Jews were dangerous magicians. And I'm quite certain, although I don't know for sure, that if they found out about these quotes, used them to prove that the Jews were dangerous magicians who could poison people's wells by magic and so forth. Well, the Zohar here says that a Jew, can accomplish that through certain magical sexual rituals. Are you listening? Do you hear? Do you see why we call this Kabbalah for heretics? If you talk about this with an Orthodox rabbi or even a conservative rabbi today, they ain't going to agree with you. They'll call you crazy. But here it is in the Zohar. And they show him how to confer certain benefits or do certain kinds of harm. Now listen, it is forbidden to a man to abandon any vessel of his house into the possession of the other side. You can do all this with the other side, but you do not abandon any of you to it. You enter it, but you do not become it. Do you hear? This is like the story by Rebbe Nachman, where the father, king, becomes angry at his daughter, the queen, the princess, and banishes her into the world. And then he regrets it, and he sends a tzaddik to find her and bring her back. And what does the tzaddik do when he comes to a point in the road where it goes to the left or the right, to the side of evil or the side of good? He takes the left-hand side, and then he sees this huge palace in front of him, the palace of evil, and he enters it, and he sees all kinds of beautiful food laid out for everyone, but he does not eat it. He goes and sits in a corner and watches. Ultimately, the princess does come down to him, but he sits in a corner and watches. He does not abandon himself to the side of evil. He enters into it and observes it. It is forbidden to a man to abandon any vessel of his house. A vessel here is a reference to the Sephiros. They are um, repeatedly called vessels in the Zohar. He does not abandon any vessel of his own house into the possession of the other side. For many emissaries are in wait to punish such an act, and from that time blessings do not rest upon him, all the more if he assigns to the other side the most precious part of himself, which is his soul. You may enter into the left-hand side to transform it, to use it, for good or for evil. But you must not identify with it. You must not give yourself to it. Be the evil to conquer the evil. Enter into the evil to conquer the evil, but do not give your soul to it. I hope you're listening. Now listen, I have to remind you, this is volume 5 of the Zohar. I'm not making it up. And it's so important that it's at the very beginning of volume 5. Very beginning. That's how important it is. For from that time, if he gives over the most precious part of himself to the left-hand side, having entered it, he belongs to it. And when the time comes for the celestial form, which has been given to him, to depart from this world, the evil spirit to which he clung comes and takes it, and it is never again restored to him. Enter into the other side, the Sitra Achra, the side of evil, in order to transform it, in order to use it, but do not become it. Do not give yourself to it. Wow. Whew. I think that's enough for one morning. We'll continue with this tomorrow morning. In the meantime, let me mark my place and ask David and Yishai, who are here this morning recording and editing and so forth, do you have any comments or questions? Raise your hand if you do. David, Yishai, please go ahead. Hopefully they will reflect the comments and questions many of you may have in the listening audience, but cannot ask about here because you're not here. You're in the audience listening. Waiting for David and Yishai. All right. David, here we go. Here it is. Again, the proof of the Zohar, explaining theurgy, magic, or the practice of magic, M-A-J-I-K. You practice the magic from the left-hand side, but you do not give yourself to the left-hand side. It is to transform it. Quote, he enters the palace of evil, but he does not become part of it. He does not abandon himself to the side of evil and observes it from a distance. He does abandon any vessel. He does not abandon any vessel of his house to it. Blessings do not rest on him if he abandons himself to it. You enter into the evil to conquer it, but not to give your soul to it. Oh, that, David, right on. Right on. Thank you. Yishai, go ahead. That's the Zohar. Yishai says, powerful podcast. Zohar prescribes from in there entry into the side of evil to use and transform it, but not to give oneself to it, to become it in infiltration, to observe, just becoming conscious of it, and then conquer it. Yes, boy, it's so important. And there it is in black and white. There it is in black and white. That's why I prefer the translation of the Zohar that we use, the Sansino translation, which is the first ever translation into English of the Zohar. Unlike later very scholarly translations of the Zohar, it makes no attempt to pretty up or to, um, in a sense, clean up the Zohar. It gives the plain meaning of the Zohar in translation. All right, thank you both. Excellent, excellent comments. Now let us do as I do every podcast at the end of it. Let me recite the sacred Kaddish, the prayer for the dead, to honor and raise up the soul of our dear departed brother and friend and fellow Kohen, Leonard Cohen. For you, Eliezer, Yiskadal v'yiskadal shmer abo, Bomo divro chirusei, v'yamlech machusei, v'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beis Yisrael, bagalo v'izman kol rivimno amen. Yehei shmer abo mevarach le'olam omer maya, Yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yisvarah v'yisomam, v'yisnasei v'yisadav v'yisalei v'yisalal, Shmei dekutsha b'richu, le'olam mincha b'rechosa v'shirosa tushmechosa, v'nechemasa damiran bomo v'imru amen. Yehei shlomo rabba min shemaya, v'chayinu aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mramov, hu ya'asei shalom. Aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'imru amen. And let everybody listening say amen. Well, that brings us to the end of our podcast this morning. Thank you for attending. God willing, I will be here tomorrow, as will you, God willing, when we'll continue with where I left off. In the meantime, Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmorecha.